So thank you for all for joining us. This is from 11 to 12. But I'd like to take a pulse of the audience real quick before we introduce everyone here. I'm Desiree Patno. I'm the CEO and the president of the Women in Housing Real Estate Ecosystem. And I asked Hope to help moderate this one because Hope is fantastic. And I'm going to frame it out with a little bit before we get going here. But I want to pulse the audience real quick. How many of you are lenders? How many of you are realtors? Anything else? A couple. Title, Other. Sorry. I like to get raw. Title, escrow. Okay, very cool. Love it. All right. So what I want to do and frame this real quick is that before I go to the introduction of everyone, I want to take this time to really acknowledge who you have here sitting to my right. Hope Chao. I read her introduction. How many of you read this in your magazine? Yes. One. Great. All right, it's powerful. She's been here 7 years, but what's so fantastic is I'm a data junkie. She went to the U.S. Census Bureau has already separated, as we know, no other. Okay, so you can't get data analytics unless you have the information to collect. Separated it out. Number two, Fannie Mae now has underwriting 1%. So where you're dealing with student loans, how they apply for credit. 3, check a box. What is your preferred language? Number 4, they're working on, which is on your 1003, and they're also working on what languages are available in 4 different Asian languages. That is huge. Because how can we frame this on the data analytics, except for our own personal experiences, if we don't have that broken down? So I want everyone in this room to give Hope and applause for doing how great. I'm here. The reason I led into that is I do it for gender equality for women, and we do state of homeownership for women, and we don't even track for women business owners in the federal government. It's done by third parties. So unless we all communicate in that space, it's a huge element. So I just want to make sure that we do the Department of Labor, we do the FHFA, which we all know. Our language for the strategic plan is actually our entities languages in there. So if it isn't for us working on that space, it's huge. So that's the framing. I want to make sure everyone knows the power of what we're talking about, the impact we got. So Hope, go ahead and introduce yourself. I want to have a really wonderful, fun fact about you.
Okay, fun fact about me is I have a little pug. Her name's Kuka. She's completely blind, and I adopted her about 7 years ago. That's a fun fact. So she's staying now at the Pooch Hotel in San Diego, and I can't wait to see her again tomorrow.
Awesome. That is something that when you're 5 days home in 1 month and you don't get to see your little fairy girls, it's a big deal. So very cool. Go ahead. Fun fact. Yes. But introduce yourself.
Hi, my name is Tariq. I'm CEO of Global Diversity Marketing, which is a marketing and management consulting firm out of New York. And I also am a adjunct professor of marketing and leadership at New York University. Fun fact about me that I never had tea or coffee in my life.
Oh, wow. Whoa! That's
I only drink water, no alcohol, so I get invited to so many parties, designated driver. And I'm very fortunate for that.
There you go! Very cool, very cool. For myself, for a fun fact, 2 years ago, I was asked to go speak at ultra-high net worth family offices, had no idea what they were, and here I am today, speaking at several of them every year. So if you don't know what a family office is, anyone in here know what a family office is? Me too. Family offices is where they're privately held for the ultra-high net worth. So basically, the Rockefellers, your Silversteins, your Bushes, things like that. So it's an incredible honor to be able to go to that space.
Hi, my name is Louie. I formerly served as the Nevada State Commissioner of Minority Affairs and the Chair of Economic Development for the state for about 3.5 years at 25% of all. little fun fact about me is it's a little bit of a story, so I hope it doesn't take too much time.
No, please, it's absolutely.
Okay, so I was sitting in my office and I received this call. They said, "Oh, is this Evan Louie?" I said, "Yes, it is." They said, "Oh, this is so-and-so from the advanced team of Secret Service. We're wondering if you want to drive the vice president project motorcade." And I'm like, "Yeah, like, this is sort of," they're like, "No, seriously. And you can bring 2 friends." And so, over the skepticism, I went along with it. They did the vetting, and I had to let them know by 5 o'clock that day. The next day, I came actually ironically to ARIA. He was speaking at the National Mayor's Convention. Met with him, he gave me the special VP coin, and we literally drove in the motorcade. I was driving the SUV, and we drove down the Las Vegas Strip with no cars on the road. Imagine just driving down there through red lights, and took him to Air Force 2, and then like I said, you can't take pictures, so when they went looking, I was like, took a bunch of pictures. It was an amazing experience. Little side story is, they prepped us, I'm sure Secret Service would get mad, I don't care. They said, okay, so if an emergency happens, and something happens, like the car's being shot at, or something blows up, we're just gonna leave you there. I said, oh, nice, like our priority is to protect the vice president. And I said, so we're like cannon fodder then. So that was my personal story. It was amazing experience. Thank you. Our firm, we do...
A little different.
It's kind of all over the place. We do public relations, government relations, also private equity, also an augmented reality and virtual reality company. We're pretty much one of the only ones here in Nevada. Just recently we did, I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with Hakkasan Group at all. We did their first 360-degree VR video, and with partnership with Steve Aoki. So if you go to Steve Aoki's site and you see the 360 VR, that's actually our company. We did the Hulk's first VR video and a bunch of other really cool stuff. Thank you.
Perfect.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Richard Chao from Arcadia, also known as the Chinese Beverly Hills. Fun fact, just had a baby, 7 months old. Unfortunately, he's not here with me, so I really missed him last night. I was FaceTiming him, so he just started crawling. So.
It's the first one, which
First-
is even more.
And one and only, that's it.
Very cool, very cool. Well, I have 4, so I don't know. My youngest is 21, and oldest is 34, so you have a long way to go. And they get harder as they get older. So enjoy it every moment. Word of advice. Anyway, so this is about, I want to open it up with Hope. She's got some incredible data analytics to really drive that point on the different impact you have of the different languages that are spoken, the different myths, and the different developmental stuff that's going on. So Hope, let's you take it away.
Okay, I'm going to just really touch on high-level information. So working with the Asian American consumer needs to kind of like have a better understanding of the different, I would say, ethnic groups, right, subgroups. So who here knows the top 5 subgroups within the Asian race here in the United States?
Yes.
Top 5 subgroups within
Chinese.
Filipinos, Chinese, Korean, Japanese is not in the top 5, Korean, okay. Vietnamese. And who's the, what's the last one? Indians, right? We often forget about the Asian Indians. And if you take a look at ARIA, we need to do a better job penetrating that community and inviting them into ARIA, inviting them into kind of like the group and all of that stuff. So just again, like really top level, the top 5, Chinese, big savers, right? Big savers, they typically have smaller household compositions. And who's Chinese here? Chinese descent? Is that true? Big savers? Are you guys big savers? At least that was on Prudential's financial survey.
Chinese generations.
Not as much as my mother would like me to be.
Big savers, smaller household compositions. For Indian Americans, they also have smaller household compositions, but a couple of interesting facts facts about them is that for Indian Americans, they're most likely to have been born outside of the United States. And also, they're the group that is really feeling, I would say, 100% comfortable that when there's an income loss, they're prepared for it. How many of us here can actually say, if there's an income loss within the family, we're prepared for it? So, Tariq, is that true?
That is true.
Okay,
My
so-
mother forced me to do that.
Yeah, so really, really big savers and making sure that there is reserve and when there's a rainy day. Filipinos, that's my peeps. Yeah, okay. Top level information about us, we love shopping. Because of that, we have high credit card, non-mortgage credit. And we typically have 2 jobs to support our shopping habits. Seriously, we do have typically 2 jobs.
Is nurse.
What's that?
Being a nurse.
Being a nurse, that's right. I used to live in Chicago, I think that was mentioned earlier, and I would take the train to work. I would see fellow Filipinas on the train, and the question that I often will get asked is, what hospital do you work at? And they're like, you're not a nurse? I'm like, no. Med tech? No. Well, what are you? I'm like, I work for nonprofit. And they look at me like there's something wrong with me because I'm not in the medical profession. Korean Americans. Korean Americans actually are the youngest. Who's Korean American here? Youngest of the group, right? Youngest of the group, lots of millennials. And they typically do not live from paycheck to paycheck. So that's great. That's great. Who am I missing? Indian Americans? Vietnamese. Vietnamese Americans also, just like the Indian Americans, highly likely to have been born outside of the United States and big, big savers. So I'll leave it at that, if that's okay, Desiree.
Absolutely. So if you think about it, very different. Similarities, but the idea is that, let me ask a crazy question. We're going to get to the marketing side and Tariq can talk about the ROI on it. How many of you actually market to the Asian community and break it down? The reason I say that, how many of you have ever seen something even more blunt? We have more women in this industry, right? How many of you have ever seen someone say that they market to women buyers or women-owned businesses? Go for it, Tariq. Why are the Asian population and AAPI so fantastic for the ROI return?
Thank you, Desiree. And I also like to congratulate Hope. She just got an award for the Chairman's Award. And I think as the face of America is changing, if we are living in a very disruptive environment, we all know that. The Airbnbs has given hard time to lodging industry. Uber has, challenged the transportation industry. Think about, fortunately or unfortunately, the real estate profession has not been disrupted yet to that extent. But it's not going to be too long before that happens. So think about whether you're a lender or you're a real estate professional, realtor, think about when this disruption comes, what happens. So in the older days, who did you trust most? We trust our parents, our friends, and our siblings. But today, people don't trust their parents and siblings, they trust TripAdvisor. So the mom can say this is a good hotel, but the person says, no, I read the review and I don't like it. So we're living in an environment where strangers are becoming very close. So when the disruption in the real estate industry happens, this industry is about relationship, as we all know. Now, the Asian community, or any ethnic communities, they are very strong in relationship. If you ask people in this audience, Chinese, Korean, South Asian, Filipinos, any, ask them who's your doctor, who's your accountant, and who's your financial planner. And if you're Chinese, all three of them will be most probably Chinese. Because they have a very tight relationship in that industry. It is important for people to understand when the disruption happens, people will go on Zillows, they would not have the association with their realtors, unless you come from a community that has a strong relationship. So Asian American community happens to do that. And from a marketing perspective, every company is in customer acquisition and retention. So a customer who buys a home pays the same price whether you're Chinese or you're Hispanic or black or white. It is the same price. But to get a Chinese or Asian consumer is a lot cheaper because the media to get the consumer is much cheaper. So if you want to be really a major sponsor at a big conference, 1,500, 2,000 people, ARIA probably for $250,000 you do a great job. But if you want to go to NAR and just present that money, you can't be on the top. So the entry to the cost of this market is much lower, and the retention is much better because this is how the DNA of Asian, they are hard to make a relationship with, but they're very hard to break a relationship when they're happy and satisfied with that.
Exactly, and I would even express that even a much bigger play. How many of you go to a buyer or seller and only present your book of business as being a residential person or a commercial person? Why are you not doing that as a business owner? There's 30 million business owners, small business owners that are driving the economy right now, and you're not taking into perspective where they are. How many of you do not own your own company? You report it as your own business, even though you might not be the broker of record or own the business yourself. Think about it. So if you don't invest in yourself, which he's saying is so true, is that you got, if you pinpoint your money where you're spending it, that return is going to be huge. In addition to, they're going to go look at you. If you think of a loan officer, should be an expert in banking debt, not just how to get a loan to facilitate or start that process. I'm working with an AAPI company just about that concept right then and there. You need to have that connection. The other thing is, how many of you know the last of the 56 billionaires that are women, self-made billionaires, how many you think are of Asian descent? Over half. Please.
Very interesting. So in 2017, the top 3 countries for billionaires in the world. Number 3, 18 billionaires came from India. Only 13 came from Germany. 18 billionaires came from India. And 45 billionaires came from US. And 89 billionaires came from China. Twice the US. So when you have lots of money and more money than you need to spend, what do? You spend it in real estate.
Very interesting fact, and to add one more before we go over to Evan over here. The buying power of Asian Americans was $986 billion in 2017, an increase of $709 billion, or 257% since the turn of the century. Some serious numbers. Evan, let's talk to you about, you have a very interesting platform from the government's perspective, which is what I have focused on for our trade, and obviously ARIA has done an exceptional job in that space too. How does our audience here really grab into the fact that dealing with the government, being part of the government, and interacting with them can really drive how you just had an event last night with 10,000 people, and you only have 1,000 people register on Eventbrite. How does that play that they could go, wow?
Well, I look at civic engagement is very important in any community. Here locally, we have the Asian Community Development Council, and I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with OCA Las Vegas, or OCA is a national organization. We did just have our event last night. We got about 1,000 registrations. It was so packed. There was thousands of people waiting outside to come in. It's just amazing. But from the state side, you look at for instance, I sat as chair of economic development for the Department of Business and Industry, and being able to have access to certain projects that are in development or planning. I'm sure a lot of them tied to real estate. As you guys know, 50% of all jobs created here in the state are construction. And the other thing is being able to be involved in organizations like those regional Southern Nevada Housing Authority, and a lot of even the elected officials, whether you're looking at municipal level, city and county, or the state level, they're always looking for advisory. The thing that I have challenged is that, and lately there's been a huge change, but when I first arrived here in the state of Nevada, we didn't have many Asian Americans as a voice at the, being a seat at the table and really providing insight about our community. Just recently, actually I As of this year, we received a state proclamation, which is Asian American Day. That's a huge achievement for the state of Nevada. And you know, we also want to be engaged more with our elected officials when it comes to federal funding, for example, for affordable housing. You know, there's been a lot of federal cuts in budgets. We look at organizations like HUD as an agency. At the state side, you know, those are other insights that we feel is important, and it's glad that ARIA is involved as a national organization. We're very grateful that we came out to Las Vegas. But when we're talking about engagement, there's other kind of, I guess you'd say, subgroups or other ways to engage the community other than standard, a lot of our 501c3 organizations. What I found myself is, you know, for example, let's look at the South Asian community. I typically network with our doctors, our lawyers, even our software engineers, within the Muslim community. And it's a private associations that we build that network. And we also realize there's a lot of cultural nepotism in any community. Every sub-ethnic group has its own, to say, sub-ethnic, nepotism, if you will. So we've realized that even going through the faith-based approach, whether you're going to a Buddhist temple or one of the mosque, for example, or even for the Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander community, a lot of people don't know they're actually Mormon. So you go to their wards and be able to associate through their type of events. But yes, just to give you some statistics for those who are not familiar, Nevada has the fastest growing Asian American population in the entire country. We've grown as a demographic 120% in the past 10 years. We're actually pretty much 1 out of every 11 people here, and we just, it's a very great demographic to go for here in our markets.
Very cool. I'm sitting here, I want an article from you on the what you just did with the day, make a debt declaration, obviously, and the impact of what's going on and how it ties into ARIA. Well, why would not ARIA be an ARIA hotel? And really, come on, guys. I mean, hello. I think it's a great play on the words, the dynamics here. But also, you hit some very interesting dynamics from the nonprofit standpoint and where that goes. I cannot tell you that we were able to call up when we had our event in Chicago. Too bad, hope, could have brought you back to Chicago. But we had the First Lady of the Governor of, the First Lady of Illinois come and speak at our conference. And to get her, we didn't know her, we didn't call her. All we did was call the Chamber for the World Congress for Chicago for obviously retention of employees and businesses. But the idea was that we called them and said, who's your nonprofits? We want them to come and have a free nonprofit day there. And they gave us to one lady, Cass, and within one phone call, she had signed up to be our keynote speaker. So the idea is that leveraging those relationships would go, and now we're doing a lot of work together. So those are the books of farm I'm trying to go. So I want to play that right into you, Richard, because here you are, you're the manager, regional manager, or sales manager, okay, for Wells Fargo. And you made a very interesting stat. I mean, I did give him a little hard time for not giving me any questions asked, but that's beside the point, so I had to get him on stage. So he said 90% of his business is from referrals, and 100% of his business is from the Asian community. 90% referrals, that means you're killing it as a sales manager, but also the dynamics. You cannot have been in the business that long because you're not that old. But to have that source, you have to build not only in the book of business of originating a loan, refinance a loan, but go to Tariq's point here of building an entire trust. I guarantee you, you go out and say, here's a doctor, here's an accountant, here's a financial advisor, here's somebody who can help them. The advice you got from having the first student, right? Talk about that.
Yeah, so, well, thank you for the question, but I really have to give a lot of credit to my employer, Wells Fargo. They gave me such a platform for me to do my job and do it with ease. Getting referral business is really understanding what their needs are. So, usually when I meet a realtor, like let's say at ARIA, I'll ask them, what are you looking for in a loan officer? Really understanding the business. A lot of times a lot of people expect referrals, but they don't go in depth and try to become a friend first, right? For me personally, I always believe that if you're really a true friend, you would know everything about that And once you know them, then you understand how they work. And if you can figure out a way to make it easier for them, or figure out a way to really allow them to do their jobs better, then it's a win-win situation. So that's why I've been blessed with all the referrals. Some of my biggest referral partners are sitting right here today. They found out.
Right. Two-way street.
Yeah, so they found out I was speaking and they were excited, wanted to come and show support, which is great. So I appreciate them. But when I joined, when I started this business 15 years ago, when I was
You look a lot.
21 years old, when I got straight out of college. But my first 7 years, I never knew anything about ARIA. And when I joined Wells Fargo, it was Wells Fargo that introduced me to ARIA. And Wells Fargo was the one that made such an impact on me on how important it is to join an organization like this. And so I truly feel blessed. That's why I've been with them for 8 years, and I don't think I could ever leave.
There's a lot of news going on, and there's a lot of great people, and you have to look at that dynamic. I know the D&I space, Regina Hayward and I are close in the space that's going behind. I mean, kudos, and one quick fun fact story. Do you know they gave $16,000 to a small business every single month and asked them to bid? Wells gave them, not a loan, gave them the money because they knew they didn't have the money and the capital to get it done. At the end of the day, they got a $70 million contract. They won it against American Express, and they beat them out. She lost a small business on her data collection card, but she gained an incredible company because she knew she could highlight it. But where do you hear that? And that's what I want to go back to Hope back here and Tariq, is what happens behind the scenes, what you don't see. You see, oh yeah, we did this, okay. But the impact of what we're doing is the work that we're doing behind the scenes is so powerful. So let's go over to Hope. We talked about, we have some incredible fun facts that I want to go over real quick that I'd like anyone to jump out and talk about them. They're saying that the buying power of the Asian American could reach $1.3 trillion by 2022. So if we're focused on, we're seeing as a whole, and you've heard from Hope, there's different data analytics on different, whether you're Asian, Indian, or Filipino, or, I mean, you kept hearing Miss America this morning talk about how she didn't feel like she fit in. She's in Hawaii, she's Filipino. You're like, wait a second, right? But the idea is that we're all unique. We all have our own unique DNA. How does that going to correlate on how we talk and think? So I'm asking Hope, what be something that you feel that you're not, what I love about you also, besides being a great human being, but you came up to and spoke at our conference and you said, not all Asians are millionaires. Demystify it. We all don't know how to cook Asian food. All that stuff. So if you were to break it down to what are we going to do to really hone in on help communicate in a bigger play, what would be the 3 takeaways that you'd like this audience to really absorb? Because you're not a lawyer, you're not a lender, you're not in the business except running this incredible organization that I am so thankful that of all the organizations out there, NAWRB and ARIA have the most quality relationship as a human element. And I want to thank you for that, for everyone the presidents go to every event. They're national presidents, and we connect 4 or 5 at the same event. That's crazy, and it could be a regional. So talk to me about how you would think of some of the great takeaways that you'd like them to know about.
Okay, so, the session title is Connecting with the AAPI Consumer, right? So if I were to break it down to 3 C's, who are lenders here again? What are the 3 C's to lending? Credit, collateral, and capacity to pay, right? If you're working with the Asian American consumer, I would suggest thinking of 3 other C's. That is community. Be engaged in our community. You don't have to be Asian American to be plugged into our community, but participate in our events. The other thing is culture. Understand the different culture nuances about our community, right? Because each community is very different. The Philippines was colonized by Spain for almost 500 years. How many of you know that? So our language, our food is actually much more closer to Spain than the rest of the Asian countries. We're probably one of the countries in Asia that do not use chopsticks, right? So there's this misconception that our food is very similar, and it's not. In fact, I think, Evan, if the Filipinos here in Nevada actually classify themselves as Asian Americans as opposed to Hispanic Americans, that number is probably higher, but it's true. Some Filipinos actually will classify themselves as Hispanics just because of that tie into Spain. Community, culture, and finally, communications. We talked about language access. You don't have to speak our language, but just understand that there are different languages within the Asian community. And to the extent that you can, at least kind of like try maybe the basic ones. Right? Hello, for Filipinos, because of the influence of Spain, a lot of it is very is Spanish, right? Como está, la mesa for table and all of that stuff. But just kind of like learn basic stuff, so that way when somebody walks into your office, somebody walks into your bank, you can actually get them engaged with communications to you. So again, 3 takeaways: culture, community, and communications.
Excellent. Love it. Thank you. So Tariq, when you become a referral of a client that is a homeowner, you have to wait till them move, maybe 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, or their friends and things like that. But going after a business, how do we get the companies to invest into the Asian segment? What does that look like, and how can you really develop a referral bank from that company? Like, I did relocation for the Fortune 100 companies 20 years ago. How do we get into that space and really drive that home, what you're talking about?
Great question. And this is the last quarter. Most of the corporate folks are sitting with their budget. Every company is saying, do more with less. And the challenge that you're facing is, where do I invest the less money that I have? There are so many segments. And the reason I would like to make a case for ARIA, not because Hope and Brandy are sitting with me, because they really give you, try to understand how the dynamics are changing. In every country in the world, there are a few companies which are changing the dynamics. In China, it's Jack Ma and Pokemon through Alibaba and Tencent changing the world. Here, Amazon and Google is entering our lives. So Amazon is the #1 company in customer satisfaction. They started in 1994 by selling books. Today they sell everything. Very near future, you will see that Amazon will send you a package when you're not home, and they say, can you give us the access to your home? And they'll take the package through a drone to your house. And they'll ask you on the phone, where would you like us to drop this eyeliner that you ordered, upstairs or downstairs? And you'll say, can you drop it upstairs? And they'll tell you that, okay, while you're dropping this upstairs, your faucet is leaking. Can I arrange a plumber for you? They're entering our lives because they're selling the data, Facebook and all that. So when that happens, every consumer will have no relationship. The organizations like ARIA and the communities where people are intertwined, that is the opportunity you would have left that Amazon would have a difficult time competing. Because they're going to buy Zillows of the world and all these companies. They have the money. Jeff Bezos is the richest man in the world. He bought Washington Post. What do they have to do with media? Because if it's up to Amazon, they'll tell you, give us all your money and we'll take care of everything, send you to vacations and your children's education. And I don't blame them, but that's how the world is changing. So if you're sitting as a mentor and you're trying to build a relationship with a community and organization, go to the community where the business still happens on a handshake. Randy is in a luxury market. But the clients that he had, many of them don't check his qualification, although he's very qualified, but based on the relationship and the handshake. So Asian community, just like any other ethnic community, whether it's Black, Hispanic, they have very strong relationship. And at the same time, international opportunities. I just told you that most billionaires are coming from China. And billionaires, they have bought everything and everywhere else. But when it's a part of the Asian culture. As soon as we achieve something in our life, we like to show off in our own way. We love luxury cars. We like to own real estate. And there are two cities that we would love to buy real estate in, London and New York. Not because I'm from New York, but that's a automatic thing, or LA, because a lot of people from California. So it's important for companies as lenders to start building a relationship now, because this is going to last you and that will provide you a better investment for you. And even to realtors, I say that think about it, don't give up your relationship opportunity that you have. That's why companies come to you. That's why Wells Fargo, JP Morgan, all these companies invest in you.
That was excellent. I can take that point. We all know who Gabi Herman is, correct? The CEO of Beth Sullivan in New York. She bought Prudential for $1,000. Got $1 million loan after 72 banks. She was able to buy the rest of the company when they went to sell it because of that relationship she built. Everyone else could have bought it, but no one. So when the market crashed, with 9/11, she went and bought every brokerage she could get her hands on. And today, you mention her name, you go somewhere, follow them. We'll never leave her, no matter what happened, didn't happen, go through that. So that's the relationship and the depth that we're talking about, which is the Asian culture houses. This is phenomenal.
So let's move over here to,
Thank you, Anna.
that was great. So Evan, if we were to go and look at I'd like to talk about how we can leverage the media market. Here you are, you're doing, capital markets, you're doing AI, and that driving force that we just heard from Tariq about, how Amazon's going to go into my home and see that I have nothing but a packed rack stack of antiques in my home and go, whoa, okay, but we have a robot do it, so we're okay. But at the same time, AI in the wrong hands means nothing. AI has to have the human touch still because it's a leverage of the media. So how do we get everyone in here to understand that the culture has to relate to when we're coming through, that the individuality of the dialects that we just spoke about from Hope?
Okay. So going back from a media standpoint, so there's local and national publications. I'm sure many of you are familiar with like Asian Journal, Chinese Daily, there's TFC for the Filipinos. What we've noticed is using like in-language programs, whether you're sending out like direct mailers or you're doing advertisements, whether you're putting in Chinese, Vietnamese, Thai, even putting into golf, or being able to do that type of outreach. And a good example is we actually had to do outreach for a PR project, and I personally, I'm going to tell you honestly, my only other language I can speak a little bit is Spanish. Fifth generation Chinese American. So we actually had to hire a team of 15 subcontractors, and we were given a list to do AAPI outreach throughout Nevada. It was tied to the election cycle itself and U.S. Senate and presidential races. So we took the list, and I intentionally hired diverse groups. I said, okay, you speak Tagalog, you speak Mandarin. And we looked at the list and we carved out by last names. But like, as she mentioned earlier, Filipinos have Spanish last names. So sometimes you can't tell, even when you're trying to parse that data or separate it to figure out whether, so we'd call people and find out that, for example. But that, once going back to that nepotism, that connection that they make when they're making that outreach and saying, oh, you're also one of myself, or oh, you're from Hawaii or so on. So that connection in our outreach efforts was very valuable in how we built that relationship or rapport during our outreach. But using those media channels and providing those in-language programs, and the feedback we get from whether it's our mailers or advertisements was, wow, they actually took the time to customize their outreach to our language. And that's very unique, even on the political spectrum. I'd also say, when you're also doing outreach, you also want to look at the iconic Asian American companies. So here, for example, if you're local here, you're familiar with Greenspun Media, who owns a lot of our media, Las Vegas, Vegas Inc., the Vegas Sun. They actually sold their company, Vegas.com. So when you go to Vegas.com, it's actually owned by Remark Media now. That's actually a Chinese company that did that acquisition not too long ago. There's companies like AREAA Gaming. They actually, it's the first Asian American owned casino here in Nevada. They have a resort over in Mesquite as well. Arcadia Associates, they're a $500 million government contracting firm. They just hired, I think, their 1,000th employee.
Okay, stop you right there, sorry to interrupt. $500 million government contracting. How many of you want that space? So when I talk about just doing normal book of business of buying and selling, go back to Tariq saying, get into those companies, how you selling and pitching, you can then go into the government space of doing that book of business. I'm trying to create this ecosystem. Sorry.
Oh, no. So, Yamamoto Enterprises does large portfolio acquisitions. They do real estate acquisitions. And, a lot of these companies, not only are they Asian American owned, but they also have reload programs like you guys were talking about, relocation programs. When building that relationship, you have that referral network as whether you're, a real estate agent or broker. So, little background on me, I'm not big on real estate, but I did do a stint in real estate. So my father was a commercial real estate broker in San Mateo County and Santa Clara County in California. Unfortunately, he had a severe or acute stroke and had right side paralysis. So I actually left my position in Silicon Valley to help him go through rehabilitation. So I actually got my license in a while ago, like 2004. So April of that year, I got in. I said, okay, so if I'm going to take a sales methodology approach and apply more like the corporate disciplines like Oracle and Microsoft's approach, what I do, I create strategic partnerships, or lending, referral networks, but let's focus on ethnocentric. So I went out to say, okay, where are the software engineers networks? Where are the Filipino, nursing association would be a key thing for the Filipino community. But so I tapped into those networks, build a referral network, and honestly, from April of that year to December, I sold $19 million in sales in the first year. It was right. I worked for the Remax State Brokerage and got the Rookie of the Year award and stuff like that. But that same kind of methodology applies in any community or kind of regionalized area. There's also a company here called Sunbase Supplies. So if you go to any of the casinos, all the interior design that you see is provided by Sunbase Supplies. They have sourced 80 manufacturers from China, bring it over. But those partnerships, they work very closely with D&I programs or diversity initiative programs. So they're kind of like the poster child for like MGM and Caesars Resorts. But like I said, those relationships have created a tremendous amount of referral business for having those relationships.
Excellent. So did you see how he applied Hope's data analytics, Tariq's progress of going to data analytics for dealing with the consumers, the companies, and dealing with the bigger picture? These are all dreams that should not be dreams. They should be reality. So think about them, because these are opportunities that you can play into space. And this is not just he's talking about Vegas because obviously he is here and this is a place of business. But these are applicable to every single major metropolitan area across the United States. Okay? So, thank you for that. Richard, let's look at the picture on, if we take it back to the scale of most of the people in the room here. Is there any difference, and I'm going to throw Rosie out there, so, is being prepared to, storytelling, is getting the loan to be closing? One of the things that I really affects me is that if you're a lender and you wait, a week or two to tell me there's a disruption in my loan from not being closing, you're off my list because you didn't communicate me within 24 hours. We got a problem, how to deal with it. Now, obviously, with the Privacy Act, we can't discuss what it actually is, but we can at least get a frame around it. So, how can we relate to the audience to really connect that certain things happen that maybe be different, that help them out, and how well prepared to have the packages put together that you find that make you so successful that can help that maybe would generate that, not just maybe you can break it down to maybe some of the different specifics in there.
Sure. Yeah, so that's a great question. Earlier, Hope mentioned that there's 3 C's. At Wells Fargo, we actually have 5 C's. So on every file, we're expected to tell the story in like a very detailed way to help the underwriter understand everything about this customer. So usually, right when I start an application or I'm meeting with the customer, I try to really get to know them. I always tell them, hey, I'm like your attorney, so you gotta tell me everything, all the dirt, okay, so I can plead your case. So I really try to get to know them, how they work, why, where they work, even their savings. Really trying to be a best friend.
Is there any differences between, we saw that there's, buying patterns
Yeah.
and things like that. Can you relate to a little bit of that?
Sure. And it's really funny you mentioned that because my wife's Filipino. So I think that's probably one of the reasons why they picked me to speak for the connection.
So you were getting stuff out.
So because my son's Chinese Filipino, so he's the true definition of AAPI. But even at family parties, it's completely different, right? So I go to the Filipino family parties. It's big family party, right? Because she's got siblings and cousins, and they enjoy music. They like to sing karaoke. They have a feast, right? You go to my Chinese side, I'm not like I'm like an only child. And, I have like 2 cousins. We're eating vegetables. There's like maybe 1 meat dish, right? So I mean, understanding the cultural differences is very important, and same goes with our customers, right? So Chinese people, my top 3 sources are Chinese Americans, Indian Americans, and Filipinos. Those are my top 3 customer base. And so Chinese and Indians, they're very similar in certain ways. They're very, very sharp with numbers. Okay, so don't ever miscalculate because Chinese people have an abacus. Indians, they just have a calculator inside their head. So before I can tell them the rate or the payment, they already have to figure it out. They just want to ask me to basically validate their math. So they're very sharp. They like numbers. So number is probably more important to them than anything else when it comes to doing a loan, right? The Filipinos that I normally deal with, they usually are very strong on to income, right? Compared to the Chinese or the Indians, they're small business owners. They might have a lot of savings, but they report very little income.
It's all
so it's really understanding the cultural differences and finding ways to make it work.
Excellent. Well, we have only a couple minutes left, so we'll open the questions for the thing. So anyone would like a question for anyone?
You mentioned you had 5 C's.
Yeah.
The compensating factor.
Compensating factor is huge. That's right. So although most lenders don't look at compensating factors, Wells Fargo is probably one of the few lenders that actually really care about compensating factors. In fact, our underwriters are not here to turn down loans. Our underwriters are really here to make a loan.
Well, if you look at the bigger picture, I live in Irvine, and very few foreclosures when the meltdown happened. They had extended family, and people they could source out. They had assets that they could sell, whether it be cars, or be clothes, furniture, you name it, they could sell. So they kept them. Yeah, there was a big there's no argument. Any other questions? Thank you for the question. Yes.
When Hope actually talked about the culture itself, right? Understanding the culture itself. When people ask me, what are you? And I always say, I'm geographically Asian, but culturally Hispanic. That's pretty much how I describe myself all the time because of the last names of the Filipinos. But I think the biggest challenge that we have here, because I do a lot of the AAPI communities in Houston, I'm from Houston, Texas. And the biggest challenge that we see on the AAPI, understand the consumer side, is that segregation gap and also the generation gap. It's understanding the culture of each of these Asian that's combining in making themselves Asian American. It's really that understanding in having that segregation because sometimes you see Chinese are in this side here, the Vietnamese are here, Filipinos are here, but we call ourselves Asian American. And everything is about the numbers. If we don't combine those 5, the assets, we're not gonna see the numbers. During the statistics that they did for 2010, Asian American actually is second to Hispanic. They're anticipating 2020 that we're surpassing the Hispanic in the statistics. So now, how do we? I think I'm going to ask Evan, because you're into politics. So you both of us, we understand the government process of this, right? And how do actually the government or in that segment will be able to get the Asian American come in, because I think we're so known as the civic type and we don't engage in the political process. And if you're not in the table, you're in the menu. Right? So I think the biggest challenge for us is how does the Asian American community come in and support and be engaged in the political process and help shape the social and economic process of the...
Get more of your Congressman shoes out there.
As I mentioned earlier, is taking appointments. Like you can go from a board of C3 to an appointment on the planning commission, a state commissioner, any of the subcommittees that apply to real estate economic. I actually serve on economic development. That's the first step to be engaged. You know what? Honestly, all these politicians here in the state of Nevada, I can tell you, testify them. They're always asking, "Can I get someone from your community to be advisor?" I'm serious.
Right.
We have challenges, whether it's the Minority Health Commission, economic development. We just don't have enough people engaged in the process, and so we try actively, whether it's doing through town hall discussions with our elected officials, or we're talking about forums on healthcare, housing, affordable housing. Those are ways we're trying to get them engaged, but also, be a voice in our community and be able to be in an advisory capacity. Or, here's an interesting fact. We have we have one half Japanese elected official in the entire state of Nevada.
Wow.
Her name is Jerry Schroeder. She's one of my mentors. She's a mayor pro tem of Henderson. That's sad. Given that our population is 11% of the state, historically we had somebody who was Asian Secretary of State from 1995. That was she didn't even finish her term. In the entire history of the state of Nevada, we've only had that person elected to represent such a vast demographic. So that's one of the things that we encourage is really is the outreach. We also pursue the younger generation, the millennial generation, to really kind of step it up and make that transition. But we need more leadership. We need more of those voices.
Thank you.
We're out of time. I hate to say it, right? We gotta go. Okay, so I would, thank you all and give the panel a round of applause. If you have any extra questions, please email Hope or myself. We'll be happy to answer them because this dialogue has got to continue on a daily basis. So thank you all for coming.